Okay, for this first video, we're going to review the two basic processing methods, setup and draw, and we're going to review creating global variables. So in processing, you can use it in two ways. You can use it in what's called static mode, where you can't animate anything, or you can use it in active mode. When you're using the setup and draw methods, that's active mode. You can't mix and match the two. So for example, static mode, you can just use it processing by making still images using shape functions. So if I put an ellipse on an output window of 500 by 500, I could, add to that and make a picture. That is static mode. When I'm using active mode, I'm using setup and draw. I can't include any functions outside of setup or draw or outside of a class, which we will be looking at later. And by outside, I mean following this bracket that closes draw, following this bracket that closes setup in between these methods or before these methods. So if I try to put that same ellipse outside my setup method, I'm going to get an error. It looks like you're mixing active and static modes. So keep everything inside setup or inside draw, except for, of course, those global variables. Global variables are right up at the top of your program, and they're variables that can be used in any method or class in the entire program. So let's start by making a global variable x. It's an integer variable, int, and that means it can be any integer value. And I'm going to use this to make the x location of an ellipse in just a second. Setup, the first method we'll look at, happens once at the beginning of the program and then doesn't happen again until you run the program again. So this is a place where you might put things like size. Size, in fact, has to be inside setup. And this is where you would initialize a variable. So I'm going to give x a starting value of 100. Since it's a variable, that is going to change or can change if I tell it to change. And where I would change it is in draw. Draw is a loop function or a loop method. It loops through doing all of the functions inside the method, everything between the bracket that opens it and the bracket that closes it, at a rate of about 60 times a second. So it loops about 60 times a second. There is a function that you can use to adjust frame rate that we'll go over later, but unless you've got some really enormous processes going on inside draw, it's you can count on about 60 times a second. So here inside draw, you might want to use your background function. Oh, I probably should spell it correctly. 255 is white. I'll make a fill function for the shape I'm going to make. There's another video to review color. And then here's my ellipse, and I'm going to say instead of making it at a specific location like I did when I was demonstrating static mode, I'm going to use the x value as the x variable as the x location of the ellipse. Then this next parameter is the y location, so it'll be x, 100, and then the next parameter is the width, and the next parameter is the height. So x, y, width, height. Now here, I'll just make a non-moving ellipse at 100, 100, because the value of x is 100, because I haven't changed the variable. The variable is staying at 100. So you can also use algebraic equations to change the size of your variables or change your variables in your draw function. So if I say x, so that means new value of x equals x, that's the old value of x plus 1. That means every time draw loops through, it's going to add 1 to x. So the first time through, this draw will draw an ellipse at 100, 100, and then when it loops through again, it will then add 1 to the initial value of x, 100, so then it'll become 101. So the next time draw loops through, it'll be at 101, 100, then 102, and then 103. So it'll give the appearance that the ellipse is moving across the screen, when in fact it's actually just being redrawn at the rate of 60 times a second. So that's it for the first sort of refresher video for processing, and in the next one we'll look at classes.